REVA University presents REVA Podcast.
I'm chairing a committee today to select the chairman of the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. And in the vacancy circular that we have put out, though the board is physically located in Montreal, we have said the chairman can function from any city he decides to function from. During the pandemic, India, after fulfilling the requirements of its first dosage of vaccine, we provided vaccine to large number of other countries. It was very much appreciated by leaders around the globe. India has been a country which has contributed civilizationally to an enrichment of cultures across the world. I don't think India should or India has ever closed its borders to this kind of cross-culture kind of development. Because what we are doing is, we are in some ways forwarding our own culture, the civilization that we inherited. So no longer should we look to education only as education to pass or to obtain a degree. It is a question of owning our professional skill sets. And the educational facilities will have to be directed towards ensuring that this is available.
Good morning. Welcome to the REVA University podcast series, an initiative for knowledge sharing and also creating a sense of community. Today, we have amidst us a guest, an eminent guest who needs absolutely no introduction. Shri Vinod Rai is a distinguished visiting research fellow at the National University of Singapore and had become a household name prior to that as CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General of India. He foregrounded qualities such as transparency and accountability as being core aspects of good governance. Owning multiple roles, he was the chairperson, Asian Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, chairperson, United Nations Panel of External Auditors, member, Independent Audit Committee of the UN. An IAS officer of the Kerala cadre, Shri Vinod Raj has worked in the Ministries of Commerce, Defence and Finance. In conversation with the very versatile, widely travelled Shri Vinod Rajji. Sir, a very warm welcome to you, and it's indeed an honour having you amidst us today.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's a remarkable occasion for me to visit your university, to learn about the university and the high ideals to which this university is committed. Believe me, it's been a learning for me. I was not aware of it, and I'm very honored to be a part of your system today.
Thank you, sir. It's indeed a pleasure. I'd like to take off from the title of the talk that we had today from you, 21st Century Education, Compulsions and Purposes that should drive it. Could we look at it in terms of having two aspects, the education today? The compulsion aspect and the aspects which amount to purposes. Could you elaborate on that, sir?
Yeah, see, for a country of the size that we are, country of the size that our young population is, where our median age is only 26, and we have roughly 50 crore young people in the age group below 23. Our compulsion is to ensure that they get the benefits, the fruits of education, to ensure that besides everything else, they become good citizens of this country, and then they own their professional skills in whatever it is. So the fact that we can reach out to them in some ways in which physical education facilities can be provided to them, some ways in which online learning can be done also, because India is a vast country.
Yes.
There are inaccessible areas, and we may not be able to provide physical infrastructure in certain areas. The other is the purpose of the education, what the mandate would be today. Education has undergone a paradigm shift. The developed world today doesn't require just graduates or people. We have to have certain expertise, and we have to own our skills to ensure that we are creative, we are innovative, and we are able to ensure that we are cogs in that particular wheel itself. So no longer should we look to education only as education to pass or to obtain a degree. It is a question of owning our professional skill sets. And the educational facilities will have to be directed towards ensuring that this is available.
Right, sir. Talking about the paradigm shift that you just mentioned, the education sector has gone through a recalibration, if I may say, probably in the last decade or so, particularly. Could you share your views on that? The kind of paradigm shift that has actually taken place in the sector of education today.
It's the good thing that the government has done is to ensure that our educational facilities, capabilities, and professional expertise is directed towards producing education citizens of the kind that the world requires today. Not India alone, but anywhere else in the world. To that extent, I think strategies have been honed, have been prepared to ensure that the curriculum, on the one hand, the professional expertise, on the other hand, is directed towards ensuring that the skill sets that is derived by the lakhs of people who are passing out from the education system today are attuned to taking on jobs which are the need of the hour if the country has to develop the way it is developing.
Yes, sir. You have always advocated for core qualities such as transparency and accountability. Today, we are also looking at this shift in the sector of education where we have, if not corporatized, but near corporatized educational institutions. So when we look at this change in terms of the corporatization of the education sector, how do you relate these values?
See, we must understand one thing, that it is not government alone which will be able to provide educational facilities to all the students who need to be enrolled going forward in the educational setup. So, corporates in education is a very healthy and happy development, because corporates have an idea of what is the requirement of the industry, and they will hopefully prepare a curriculum which will cater to that industry. But at the same time, we need to recognize that there is a core value that every student must imbibe, that needs to be ingrained into his DNA. And that has to be a foundation to which even the corporatized educational system has to provide a foundation of probity, integrity, transparency, accountability, to make the student first a good citizen of this country before he owns his skills to become a professional in some ways. So you may be a medical professional, you may be an engineering professional, but that is subsequent to your being on a pedestal of being a good human being. So corporatized educational system is a healthy development, but there has to be self-regulation by the corporate itself to ensure that this corporatization is not driven by a profit motive, but is being driven by a service motive, wherein, of course, they do break even, they do ensure that they don't make losses, but at the same time, they are part of the educational strategy, overall educational strategy of this country.
Absolutely, sir. The DNA that you spoke about in terms of human values, I think, is much needed paradigm today when we talk about the digital transformation in every aspect of life. In one of your articles, you had mentioned a very interesting reference to the East India Company providing compelling lessons in today's world and today's global business. Could you sum up your views on this in terms of, again, the education sector specifically and the larger global business in general?
Why I had introduced the East India Company was, East India Company came to this country centuries back as a mere trader. They soon became the face of the Raj, in this country, of the British Raj itself. East India Company, in large number of ways, could be called the first multinational company of this world, because they were trading in so many other countries. They did a tremendous job in terms of trading for their country. But then, why is it today that the East India Company is just about non-existent? Probably because they were very good at trading, But towards the latter part of their existence within this country, their trading activities, their culture of professionalism, the way they conducted business was not born on an edifice of what I would call a culture of probity and integrity. They started taking shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
They started playing favorites. They thought gifting people behind behind the back would help to enrich or enhance their business further. But they were mere shortcuts. And what they finally lacked, their managers finally lacked, was qualities of probity and transparency. And that's why I gave that example to show that you may be the best professional, the best trader in this world. But unless you base your practices, your trading practices, your professional practices on an edifice which is based on these basic qualities, you are not going to be sustainable over a long-term period. And that is the quality that India going forward needs to imbibe.
Yeah, so the wiring of ethics, honesty, probity, and whatever makes a good citizen and a good human being is sustainable.
Is sustainable
across universe,
across intertemporal.
Yes,
over long periods of time. You may progress, or you may make profits at a slower rate, but you are going to be running that marathon and not a 100-meter sprint only.
Yes.
So if you are going to be long-term in this game of economic development, making it sustainable to enrich the lifestyle or the welfare of your country citizens, you better base it on these basic qualities.
Moving on to the professional and the critical skills, that any institution of higher education demands. Very often we see, the 21st century skills, the 4Cs in particular, in terms of critical thinking, creativity, or collaborative learning or communication. There is a tendency to look at them as distinct fragments, little realizing that these need to be integrated into the DNA of teaching learning space. So could you share us your views in terms of how these could be integrated as one academic strategies and also lead us towards a more vibrant academic space across campuses?
Professor, today, more than ever before, we need to hone our skills in a holistic fashion. It has to be holistic learning. You can't be imbibing your knowledge along silos.
Right.
So there has to be a core competence. It is a core competence, which means across the board, across skill sets, and across professions, you are able to stand up on your own in terms of those core competence. It's then becomes dependent upon your aptitude, your choice, your aptitude about which way you would like to develop your skills, and then you start specializing, honing your skills in that direction. Now, it in no way is specialization in a particular sector contradistinct from your holistic learning,
right,
or to be able to be. So, any education system today will have to ensure that the products of that educational system are subject to holistic learning, where the curricula is not unidirectional or not, as I said, divided into silos, where you give the benefit of that learning on a broad base to the student, and then judging or choosing from his aptitude, make him specialize in whatever is his aptitude requirements.
Yeah. So in a sense, when we talk about these, holistic skills which need to be integrated, be it critical thinking, creativity, somewhere when we talk about the paradigm of execution, say in a teaching learning space, so it starts from the structuring of a curriculum. It moves into the teaching learning practices. It moves into the assessment practices, and then the outcome of how well-rounded a graduate is when he or she comes out of an institution. And the same holistic well-roundedness should be visible across society too.
Absolutely. And I mean, see, for people like you who are judging, analyzing, evaluating students every day, I think you need to never forget that part of the assessment of the student. Where has he over his, by pursuing his curriculum,
Yes.
whatever may have been his choice, has not lost sight of those basic ones. So in that assessment, I think a substantial, no, not a substantial, but a portion should always be there to ensure that that evaluation system does not lose sight of the fact that how well rounded has his persona become. Has he imbibed the qualities that you wanted him to imbibe, in as a good human being? And ultimately, when he passes out from your institution, is he fit to take things forward in the sense that as a ambassador of your institution?
Yeah.
That's where it matters most.
Today, in the universities or institutions of higher education, entrepreneurship is to be considered as a very organic byproduct of the learning process. How do you think, sir, could universities be a part of the startup narrative in our country?
See, I think that's a very relevant issue that you have raised, because as we just discussed a while back, today's learning process has to prepare students to contribute in a very creative and innovative way. It's not what we used to call rote learning
Yes.
once upon a time. You have to fit that bill completely. So to that extent, I think when you design a curriculum, or when corporates and universities and educational institutions and design a curriculum, it has to be architectured to ensure that the creative or the innovative skills of that particular student is developed, so that he is able to go forward and get into entrepreneurship, where the employment potential, or let me say the multiplier function, starts operating on a very different paradigm, and where he thinks forward, he thinks in innovative space, and he's creating an opportunity where lots others can contribute, not only by employment, by collaboration. And that's the entire collaborative learning process that has to be inculcated now.
Indeed, sir. In one of your, I think, talks, if I'm right, you had also mentioned, with reference to IAS officers, that there is a requirement of IAS officers to be trained after a certain time, to be specialized in certain areas. Now, this is at a common parlance, similar to the requirement of skilling graduates when we talk about them in the university space. Could you elaborate on that, sir?
Yeah. See, the Indian Administrative Service has always been defined as a service of generalists. We are often called babus, who are jack of all trades and master of none. Fair enough. Absolutely true also, because our service is designed to be like that. But times have changed. From the time I was trained, which was in 1972, to 60 years down the line, the world is changing. The requirements in the world are changing. Economic development requires different kind of perspectives. So even IAS officers today, after their foundational functioning at district level, which may be 12, 15 years of service, have to come and work in different departments, maybe in a ministry, in a secretariat. Now, if I don't have a background of, say, education, or how the educational system should be functioning, or what is the power requirement, power energy requirement of this country, or what is the health requirement of this country, what health policy, how health policy should be designed, and I am made to function in the Ministry of Health, I will not be able to contribute at all. So the government is now following policies by which, after 15 to 20 years of functioning as a journalist, IAS officers, depending upon their choice and their aptitude, are also being trained to specialize in certain streams. And to that extent, over the last 10 to 15 years, the amount of productive contribution that they are able to make to that system is very substantial. Otherwise, purely for lack of being able to understand what that strategy is, as secretary sitting in the health department would not be able to push that policy further. Today, he is able to be a part of that policy. He understands it. He becomes an advocate of that policy, and he's able to push it forward. To that extent, I think it's a very good policy being followed by government to ensure that IAS officers also professionalize and they are able to contribute better to policy planning in the public space.
Okay, sir. I think this also would help them organically understand the ecosystem of that domain that they would be handling, and contribute very productively to problem solving.
Exactly. I mean, it will not only help them to understand, but to ensure that their involvement and their contribution becomes far more constructive. Because an understanding of the system, they will be able to work better as a team among the specialists who are working on that. And to that extent, I think the best benefit will be policy planning, public policy planning.
Right. So could you throw some light on the Prime Minister's internship scheme, which looks at employability enhancement for youngsters or youth? And a lot of times, students or the youngsters do not know. So if you could throw some light on that.
Okay, I think the Prime Minister's internship scheme, which has just been put out, has been a very well-architectured scheme. A lot of thought has gone into it. And think, besides the fact that, there will be 5 crore students, who will be given the facility, they will be given internships, stipend, and a lot of them, it's Pan India scheme, it's very inclusive, etc. I'm not talking about the quantitative aspect of it. I think the qualitative design of the scheme is very good, because once the student joins that scheme, for 1 year, he's given an exposure to a real time corporate existence. He's part of a company, and 500 companies have come forward to pick up these people. That's when he's thrown into what I would call the big bad world, in which he gets to understand how a corporate entity operates.
Yeah.
That's learning, as I would say, on the machine shop.
Right.
He is actually dirtying his hands and learning it himself. That prepares him better to be able to take up a job much earlier. So to that extent, this scheme is designed very well. It pays a basic minimum. That's an entirely different thing. But the fact that 500 corporate entities have agreed and very willingly to pick up these interns shows that their contribution to that entity will also be very beneficial. So I think, if I I would exhort young upcoming students to join the scheme, own their skills, because it will give them an opportunity to be able to check their own aptitude.
Yes.
And to that extent, learn how industry actually functions.
And from what I understand, this is a part of the CSR activities of the, or rather, this would be channelized through the CSR.
Yeah, the government has included this activity, which means the internship stipend, as a part of the CSR activity. So it helps the corporate entity, it helps the students, the interns, that is, and then the larger interests of the country.
Yes.
Also, it is going to contribute very substantially.
True, sir. Most universities and institutions of higher education often grapple with this problem of bridging the gap between education and employability. So how do you think, the universities can actually cope with this gap, and in terms of helping students for a smooth transition from being educated graduates to employable graduates?
See, in the Western economies or the developed economies, one has seen, unlike the time when I was educated and I was, say, for example, doing my master's in economics, we had a purely academic curriculum that we followed. Today's students in the West, and now I think some of the universities in India also have started following it, where even at the bachelor's level, after 1 or 2 years, in the summer vacation, you are offered an internship program.
Okay.
Now, that is the time when, quality of education, the quality of employability of that particular intern gets exercised, and, he gets to know which way. So to that extent, that system of education is preparing you better to be able to take up employment in the sector of your choice. So I think we need to encourage a system where the universities and the colleges offer the students to maybe institutions or corporates nearby to be able to, gain knowledge into how those corporates are functioning in areas of their own choice.
Right, sir. Today, we talk about providing education to graduates and preparing them for jobs that really don't exist. And how do you think universities can bring in academic processes, academic audit, and also academic vibrancy to this entire unpredictable terrain?
That's, again, a very germane problem to our universities and our students, in fact, as of today. That why churn out students who will have bachelor or master's degrees, but they are not fit for employment anywhere else. Or I wouldn't like to call them fit for employment. I would like to say they are not fit for being able to constructively engage in an activity which is productive in some ways. So I think that's where the educational institutions have to redesign, reimagine, and transform their curriculum totally to see into the future what is going to be the requirements, and to be able to prepare the curriculum to ensure that their students fit those requirements. Because, we used to joke with some of our professors saying that they teach from notes that they, use for their own passing their post-graduation or whatever it was. Those times have gone. Those notes are not relevant at all. In fact, that kind of teaching is not relevant at all and is going to be a waste of the teachers and the students' time. So we need to prepare the students. It's like, a good salesman is going to sell only that commodity which is in demand today.
Right.
Isn't it?
Right.
And your commodity is that student. Putting it crudely, but your commodities are student. So you have to fashion that commodity to ensure that there is a
Demand.
willing buyer for that commodity. There is willing demand for it. Exactly. And that's how the curriculum has to be designed.
So in one of your articles, if I'm not wrong, you had mentioned about organizations, the challenges faced by organizations in terms of having, employees promote a collective self-interest rather than individual self-interest. Now, when we talk about the sector of education, irrespective of the levels, there are multiple stakeholders, in the scenario. So how do you think this can be applied?
Ma'am, firstly, I must applaud the amount of reading you've done to ensure, my entire background you picked out and whatever I've read. Thank you very much for doing all that. But at the same time, we often say that the strength of any chain is dependent on the weakest link in that chain, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, unless we go in for a collective learning, collaborative learning kind of a situation, and ensure that every cog in that learning process is not able to fulfill the task to the requirements of what it is, we are not preparing a product or a student who will be able to live up to the requirements. To that extent, what I would say is that the strength of the organization or the institution, in your particular case, is the strength of the collective body, the community of students that you are enriching and you are ensuring that pass out of the bottles of your institution. So unless that collective capacity or quality is of a high order, that average is high, that bar is very high, you will not be able to, it's useless for an institution to have somebody who is absolutely an intellectual, but at the same time, there are students who are not able to pass certain examinations also. To that extent, I think it's the collective wisdom, the collective capability, or the capacity of students that you churn out matters most.
So today, when we talk about the paradigm shift in education on one hand, particularly post-pandemic, we have also seen a kind of a shift in the work culture and workforce behavior. For example, today we no longer talk about, working physically, in the workplace. Today we also talk about working from home. Rather, we talk about a person who needs to work from anywhere. That's from the workforce. And also, on the other hand, we also have workforce who are making these very critical and crucial decisions in terms of making a mid-career shift, pursuing areas of their passion, which probably the earlier compulsions wouldn't have allowed them to do. How do you see this, going, and where do you think this will lead to?
I think one of the positive fallouts, if I can say so, of the pandemic has been the fact that we have learned, the world, in fact, has learned that being physically at one place is not necessary for an individual to be able to contribute his best, and remote working, working from home, working from multi location places is enriching the working culture in a very substantial way. To that extent, commercial institutions have realized that there's no need to have higher commercial spaces. They assign, what should I say, workloads to their employees and say, well, wherever, irrespective of where you're functioning from,
Right.
you provide the answers to whatever has been the output to the responsibility which has been given to you. In fact, if you remember from your institution headquartered in your city, one of the CEOs of Infosys was in fact functioning from the US.
Yes.
He functioned for 2-3 years, and in no way did Infosys suffer.
Yeah.
He was able to contribute as well as anybody who would have been functioning from this headquarters itself. I'll give you an example. I'm chairing a committee today to select the chairman of the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board.
Mm-hmm.
And in the vacancy circular that we have put out, though the board is physically located in Montreal, we have said the chairman can function from any city he decides to function from. So times have become such, online activity, digitization has made it so convenient that a person sitting in any remote corner of the world is able to contribute to anything by just being virtually available. So to that extent, I think institutions, agencies, corporates who are introducing this culture are introducing them for the benefit of the personnel, the professional, as well as to the contribution he's able to make to that particular entity. And I think it's win-win for both.
So I also think this could also bring in a lot of multiculturalism, which is probably the need of the times, because when you're remotely working, it gets that much easier to get people from all over. And this can actually probably bring in a very positive culture of inclusivity.
A very, very significant point that you brought out. Absolutely correct. Because it's this multiculturalism which contributes to the upgradation of any system.
Yes.
And in fact, one of the things which was at the back of the mind when I gave you the example to the Standards Bureau board was that, well, he will or she will bring into the system an entirely different dimension to the entire thing. And to that extent, it contributes very significantly to the progress of that institution.
So this is an offhand kind of a question. We have moved, I guess, as a nation and as a society. And what do you think of this kind of a transition that we speak of, from crony capitalism on one hand to the other end of the pole, where Narayan Murthy sir speaks about compassionate capitalism?
Well, I think Narayan Murthy has made a very significant, and that must have been his approach when he was working, because crony capitalism. Uh, I think one of the ills of crony capitalism is that it is capitalism which is entrusted to an entity which does not have the core strength to carry forward that particular industry or whatever it is. As on the other hand, when Mr. Narayan Murthy is talking about compassion in it, it is compassion to the setup in that particular capital structure or capitalistic structure, where the embodiment is entirely dependent upon the human element that goes into it. You cannot divorce the human element from what a robot or a machine will do. So, in being compassionate, in your corporate entity's pursuits, you are only improving the productivity of the person that you are employing. To that extent, I think he has made a very significant point in saying that if you are compassionate, you see, compassion on the one hand and being tough, on the other hand, or being objective on the other hand, are two very different things. You can be tough, but you can at the same time be compassionate too. You are able to understand the requirements of that particular individual, and you ensure that they are fulfilled, whereas you are at the same time ensuring that his productive output is also being upgraded and becomes benefit to you.
Yes. My final query to you, sir. In this digital world, on one hand, we see technology erasing, borders. And on the other hand, we have nationalist endeavors wherein we define borders and also defend it. What would or should be India's narrative?
See, India has been a country which has contributed civilizationally to an enrichment of cultures across the world. I don't think India should or India has ever closed its borders to this kind of cross-culture kind of development. And I think we should continue to contribute to development of institutions around the globe and never consider it what we used to call it brain drain once upon a time. Because what we are doing is we are in some ways forwarding our own culture, the civilization that we inherited, and the qualities that we have imbibed through this participation, collaboration that we are doing. So to that extent, the world has become flat.
Yeah.
The borders have been broken, as you mentioned. But at the same time, yes, there is no harm in ensuring that your requirements are looked at. And I think an example that occurs to my mind is during the pandemic, India, after fulfilling the requirements of its first dosage of vaccine, we provided vaccine to a large number of other countries. It was very much appreciated by leaders around the globe that we did. At some times, India was being criticized for denying it to our own population. But to that extent, India was a contributor. And I think that is our psyche. And that is a quality which has kept us afloat over the rest of the world. And I think we need to continue contributing in the same way.
Thank you, sir, for this very brief session that you had with us. It has been absolutely insightful talking to you. And if given a chance, I think this could go on for an entire day. But I know that there is paucity of time. And thank you so much on behalf of the entire REVA University for having taken time and spent time giving your insightful thoughts. Thank you so much. It was an honor, sir.
Believe me, it was a delight for me to be associated with you and your university. I think you are engaged in something which is remarkably, engaged in the task of nation building. And you must continue it. Your objectives, your missionary zeal is absolutely fantastic. And I wish you all the very best in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.